Wonderful afternoon here from Victoria. My name is Oliver Schmidtke. I'm directing the Center for Global Studies here at UVic. And the center has the privilege of co-hosting today's event jointly with the Canadian International Council and the undergraduates of political science at the University of Victoria. And we are very thrilled to have such a wonderful panel to introduce you to pathways into internationally oriented professional careers. Before we introduce our panel and get this event going, let me acknowledge with respect the Lekwungen peoples on whose traditional territory the University of Victoria stands, and the Songhees, Esquimals, and Busanish peoples whose historical relationship with the land continues to this day. I think although we live by now in a virtual world, it's important to acknowledge, the land on which we work, play, and the privilege that we have to be on the unceded territory of the First Nations here on the west coast of British Columbia. With these brief words of welcome and introduction, I would like to hand it over to the real mastermind behind this event, Chris Kilford, the president of the Victoria branch of the Canadian International Council, with whom we've had the pleasure of working together over the past couple of years, joining our efforts in introducing these opportunities that are out there for students to work in a more internationally oriented environment. So, Chris, can I hand it over at this stage to you? And again, very warm welcome from the Center for Global Studies here at UVic.
Oh, thank you, Oliver, and hi, everybody. And as Oliver said, this is the third time we've been doing this event. We had to cancel it last year because of COVID, and we've done it 2 times before. Now, the 2 times before we had pizza. This time we can't do that, but I'm glad that you were able to join us anyway, everybody. I'd like to thank Oliver, Jody, and Stephanie, and the Center for Global Studies to which they belong for partnering on with us for this event, and the undergraduates of the Political Science Club, of which Jenna is the president, and I'll introduce Jenna shortly, and then she'll introduce the panelists. And thanks to everybody who's here and everybody that offered their time to do this event today. Now, just before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about the Canadian International Council Victoria branch. Now, today we have some 440 members here in Victoria alone, and just over 100 are students from UVic, Royal Roads University, and Vancouver Island University. And all of us, we share a common interest in global affairs and where this country is headed in the world. And we spend a lot of our time focused on youth. We provide a little bit of monetary assistance to Model United Nations conferences. We launched this year an undergraduate diversity scholarship in conjunction with the Intercultural Association of Greater Victoria. And we bring a lot of speakers here to Victoria and often up to UVic so that we can interact with students as well. Now, for the students in our organization, the membership is free. So all you need to do during the course of this event is to drop your email into the chat area. I'll have my email there as well. And let's just get together and talk and start building a little network between us, the CIC, and you. Because it's important, and it's the reason why we're here today. Why this panel? And the short answer is, it's very hard making career choices. When you are looking out there to the future and what to do, sometimes it can seem incredibly daunting. For me, it was pretty simple. When I left high school at 17, I joined the armed forces. And it was the best decision I ever made. But that's not for everybody, of course. Sometimes you get a lucky start in your careers, but more often than not, it does take time, with plenty of twists and turns along the way. One key to success in the future is self-confidence. And an important part of self-confidence is preparation. There's an old saying that I know very well, and that's reconnaissance. Time spent on reconnaissance is seldom wasted. And the same applies to you as you get ready for the future. And consider this part of your reconnaissance today. And that we, all of us on the panel and who are assembled today together, will help successfully navigate in the future. Now, I'm now going to turn the floor over to Jenna Horechka. And I'm sure many of you on the call here today know Jenna. She's going into her third year majoring in political science at the University of Victoria. And she began her degree after completing a diploma at the Northern Alberta Institute for Technology for Medical Radiological Technology and working for a year in the public healthcare system. And she currently volunteers for the Student Food Bank at UVic and is active in campus clubs and currently serving as president of the Undergraduates of Political Science, as I mentioned. Now, her present academic focus is on the sociological aspects of politics. And who knows what she will do after her degree is over. Maybe today's panel will help clear the path for you, Jenna. So that's it for me from now. Don't forget to talk to me in the chat about joining CIC, and I'm handing the floor over to Jenna.
Thank you so much, Chris, for that introduction. I'm really excited to be helping moderate this event. It has been one of my favorite ones that the UPS and the CIC put on each year. Of course, with COVID-19, it has prevented us from being able to do this event in person and also enjoying some pizza. But it also has given us the opportunity to invite speakers from across Canada. And that has allowed us to have some really great speakers for this year's Canadians Going Global. So to our speakers, I'm going to start off by giving a short introduction of each of you. Then I'll ask you to expand shortly on your experiences within the field, your professional journey, and anything else you would like to add to your introduction. To begin, our first speaker I'm going to introduce is Erin Hunt. Erin is the program manager at Mines Action Canada. She has been doing public education on the Ottawa Treaty banning landmines since 2003 and working in humanitarian disarmament in various capacities since 2006. Erin's areas of expertise include the humanitarian impact of indiscriminate weapons, victim assistance, gender in disarmament, and Canadian disarmament policy. Erin was a member of the civil society negotiating team during the 2017 process to negotiate the Treaty of the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons with the Nobel Peace Laureate International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. Amazing. Prior to joining Mine Actions Canada, Erin worked on victim assistance programs for landmine survivors in Uganda, implemented sport-based peace-building programs for youth in a post-conflict setting, and worked in child welfare. She has a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Victoria and a master's degree in human security and peace building from Royal Roads University. Thank you so much for being here, Erin. I will now give you the floor to touch a little bit further on your career.
Great, thanks, Jenna. I wasn't expecting you to read the whole bio, so great. Hello everyone. As you heard, I'm Erin Hunt. I'm the program manager at Mines Action Canada, and I work on what we call humanitarian disarmament. So I work on weapons issues, but I look at them from impact on people and the environment perspective. We do a lot of work with large global campaigns, and my specific role is sort of policy, research, advocacy, both in Canada's Parliament and at the UN. But because we're a small team, I also do comms, fundraising, intern supervision, and anything techie that my executive director can't figure out. We work on landmines, cluster munitions, autonomous weapons. You might see in the news is killer robots, the use of explosive weapons in populated areas, and nuclear weapons. So it's a kind of a strange job. It's very hard to explain, and when you just meet somebody at a party, which those did happen at some point, if you all remember. But it's something that's really great. To start with, I'll just share a couple highlights, I guess, and then I'll tell you how I got here. So some of the things that we've worked on is, one, we've done a lot of work with young people and youth because the UN system in particular, and definitely peace, security, and disarmament are not designed for young people. Those are some pretty like archaic and patriarchal structures that we're working in. So we do a lot of work to train young people who live in conflict affected communities or landmine affected communities, how to operate in a diplomatic setting so that they can be heard and have their voices heard. So just last year, well, I guess in 2019, we ended up having 32 young women from over 17 countries attend the 4th review conference of the Ottawa Treaty banning landmines. And for me, a professional highlight was watching them all stream up to the front of the podium past ambassadors and the odd royalty to deliver a statement in 4 different languages to 600 decision makers. That was pretty spectacular. And I guess Jenna also touched on another career highlight, which was the process to negotiate the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, where we took it from a crazy idea that a bunch of civil society had that nobody's really banned nuclear weapons before. So maybe we should talk about the humanitarian impact of the weapons and see if we can talk states into banning them, and worked with states from around the world to get negotiations started, to develop a strong treaty. I worked specifically on the victim assistance and environmental remediation parts of the treaty. And we got the treaty, and then we won the Nobel Peace Prize, which was intense and wonderful and everything. And then just on Friday, the treaty finally entered into force, which for those of you who haven't taken international law yet, is when the treaty becomes binding for all the states parties. So that's been a big career plus for me. No one ever believes you when you tell them you won the Nobel Peace Prize, just side note. So how did I get here? As you heard, UVic political science degree. I did a minor in history, so if anyone's from history, that's fine. And after that, I interned internationally through the International Youth Internship Program, which is funded by Global Affairs Canada, and doing victim assistance in Uganda for landmine survivors, and ended up getting hired on to do sport-based peace building there. Decided I didn't like getting the risk of being shot at, and I liked hot showers. So I tried to have a normal job for a little bit and worked for the government of British Columbia in the Ministry of Children and Family Development. But turns out normal isn't great for me. So I also did a degree at Royal Roads doing the human security and peace building, while also helping to run a small nonprofit that some people I grew up with had started. I did some field research on youth-based peace building in Uganda, and on my way back from that, swung by Ottawa to say hello to the folks that I had interned with. And they actually offered me the job that I'm in now. It was a 3-month contract about 9 years ago, and they've continued to give me more work and interesting stuff. So now I'm permanent. And I'll leave it there, and I'll look forward to questions and stuff from everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erin. The next panelist I'm going to introduce is Sandra Leduc. Sandra has spent half of her life living and working abroad. She has worked overseas with the Government of Canada and the United Nations on justice and human rights issues on multiple occasions, including in Afghanistan, the Palestinian territories, the Netherlands, and India. Recently, she served as Director of U.S. Relations for Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship, Canada. She currently serves as a General Counsel with the Department of Justice Canada, where she has helped lead the department's effort to introduce legislation to implement the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. In her spare time, Leduc is an avid adventurer, being the third Canadian woman to have summited the 7 summits, the highest mountain on every continent. She summited Mount Everest in 2012. That's a pretty cool feat. Thought we would add that in. Thank you for being here, Sandra. I'll now give you the floor to touch on your career journey a bit further.
Thanks so much, Jenna. And I had to laugh because I feel bad for our remaining speakers. So the first, Erin was talking about her Nobel Prize. And I didn't realize in the introduction you were going to talk about Everest. So there you go, just fun stuff that you do when you get to work abroad. Listen, what I'm going to do for you is go through very, very briefly my career, how I started and how I got here. And then I'm going to tell you, I think, some of the lessons I've learned along the way, because I've now had I'm close to 20 years of experience in the public service, and I've had some hard knocks, and I'm sure in this context you're most interested in how you can get a job, and you're worried about what's out there. So hopefully I can give you a little bit of hope that you never know where you're going to be or what you're going to do. So I graduated from law school back in 1999, and I didn't fit the mold in law school at all. I wanted to go abroad, and despite the fact that most people in law school professed a love of human rights when they started, they quickly bought into working for the biggest firms and getting the biggest paycheck. And I just wanted to go abroad. So I signed up, and it's interesting because it was the same thing as Erin. I signed up for a youth international internship program with Foreign Affairs. I just applied without having any idea what it really was. And the day I graduated from law school, they called me up and said that they had pre-selected me to go to India. And a month later, it was confirmed, and I was going to India to work for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. So I was there for a year working in the legal department. I had the best year of my life, and I did not want to come back. But this is the one time in my life I succumbed to parental pressure. I'm sure many of you have this. Parents really pressuring you on what to do. And my parents were aghast that I wasn't doing my bar school, that I wasn't going to be a lawyer, or so they thought. And so I went and did my bar school. And I remember in Montreal waking up every day thinking of blue skies and wishing I was back in Delhi. And the moment that I finished my bar school, I secured articles with the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in Holland. And I got that because I had previous experience working for the UN. I had a demonstrated interest, and everything kind of snowballed. So once that finished, I came back to Ottawa, and I got a job with the Department of Justice in the Human Rights Law section. I worked there for a number of years. A position in Afghanistan came up with Foreign Affairs. I jumped on it and was very lucky. I felt privileged to be selected. I went to Afghanistan. I worked on human rights issues for the Canadian Embassy, both in Kabul and Kandahar. I spent 2 years there. I came back, did not want to come back. And then I went back abroad and worked for the Canadian mission to the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah. I was there for 3 years, loved every single moment of that, and then came back to justice. And you've heard that I came back, and I've worked for the Department of Immigration on US relations in the middle of the Trump years. So I was looking at all the politics in the US, trying to figure out, and that was my role, figuring out what Trump was doing on immigration, his priority, and reporting back and trying to figure out what Canada was going to do. So I worked crazy hours, but loved every minute of it. And I kept telling my team at the time, you know, we'll look back in 20 years at this craziness in the US and I'll get to think, here I was working on these issues at this time. So in the past year, I came back to Justice in order to move forward on important legislation that I really believe in. We introduced in December legislation on the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So that's my career in a nutshell. It's 20 years worth of career graduating from law school. But you know, some of the lessons I wanted to highlight for you is, you never know where you're going to end up. I still have these questions today. There is no right path. I know you're probably thinking, should I do this or that? Ultimately, there is no right answer. And you can think that you might be going down the wrong road, but the important thing is to stay true to what you believe in. If you're passionate about going abroad, you're going to figure out how to get there. Your career choices will naturally push you in that direction. That's number one. Number two is nurturing your passions. You know, I would have never thought that climbing was something I did on the side. I told my Facebook friends, people at work, some knew, some didn't. And I never did it for my career. And for some, you know, people latch onto that. And I was surprised that my everything that I've been taught as a climber has an impact on my work. So your passions will often and will often deeply interconnect with who you are and will make you into a more interesting person. So actively pursue them no matter how busy you are. And the last thing I wanted to tell you is, you're going to fail 1,000 times. I'm probably one of those people who have been rejected for jobs. You know, one of the, most often, I remember when I was in law school, I kept all the rejection letters to law firms that I had written to. I had over 100 when I graduated. And I continue to apply to jobs that interest me. Sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. But I think what differentiates me so far in my career path, when I look at my colleagues, is that, you know, I took the knocks and I got up again. And so you will fail. Just move forward. Always move forward and don't be afraid to fail. So that's it for me. Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I really appreciate that. Our next panelist I'm going to introduce is Sarah Briotman. Sarah is another U of Vic alumni and an incoming junior policy analyst with Public Safety Canada. After completing her BA in political science at U of Vic, Sarah worked for the BC Public Service before ultimately deciding to move to Hamilton, Ontario to pursue her master's degree in global politics at McMaster University. Having completed her master's degree during the height of the pandemic, Sarah has made the decision to move yet again, this time to Ottawa, to pursue a career serving Canadians with the federal government. Driven by her passion for global affairs and innovative policy, Sarah is thrilled to be joining the National Security Policy Directorate at Public Safety Canada. Sarah is passionate about topics related to gender equality, citizenship, and human rights. Thank you for being here, Sarah. I'll now give you the floor to touch a little bit more on your career journey.
Great, thanks, Jenna. I mean, I will keep my comments a little bit briefer just because I'm earlier into my career and I am now very inspired by Sandra and Erin, but I don't have a Nobel Prize and I have not climbed Mount Everest. So, you know, things to go on the checklist. So yeah, I'm a UVic alumni. That's where I did my undergrad. I was a member of the UPS, actually. I put on a couple events similar to this and had the pleasure of moderating them. So Jenna, I feel your pain. After graduating with my BA from UVic, I went on to work with the BC Public Service. And I spent about a year there working in procurement. And that's something that I would really encourage anyone who's unsure of what their path looks like moving forward, is to really take that break between whether that's further education, a big law school, an international career, having some time to work, especially locally where it's kind of baby steps into those big chapters of your life, was incredibly useful to me. To be able to work in an office setting, in a government environment, in a town where I had grown up and still had connections and family, was incredibly useful in the transition. So after working there for about a year, I decided to go on to do my master's degree, which is what brought me out to Ontario originally. And while I was in my master's, I really had an opportunity to kind of expand on my passions and look for what was interesting to me. So I ended up spending most of my time doing research on feminist security studies, and specifically looking at Israel and the Palestinian territories, which was really important to me and kind of spoke to my heart. And I would echo Sandra in that when you go after what you love, the job kind of finds you. I spent a lot of time applying to jobs that were not going to fill my cup, and I was overqualified for and somehow still didn't want me. And the right job found me in that through kind of consistently staying true to what I wanted to work in and being passionate, I was introduced to my manager, and now I'm really excited that I work for Public Safety Canada. I joined them quite recently. I'm on week 2 of the job, and I'm working with them as a junior policy analyst. So my team specifically, we work with information sharing in the national security sphere, currently really working to promote public engagement, make that process a little bit more transparent, which is, yeah, very exciting. So it's a different pathway to a more global career that kind of goes beyond the more traditional diplomatic or global affairs routes. That would be my highlights.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah. Our last panelist I will be introducing is Jesse Baltutis. Jesse is currently a senior policy analyst at the Climate Action Secretariat at the BC Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy. Prior to relocating to BC and completing his PhD at the Water Innovation and Global Governance Lab here at UVic, as well as his fellowship with the Borders and Globalization Project at the Center for Global Studies, Jesse spent 3 years working, studying, and volunteering abroad in the United Kingdom, Kenya, and Palestine. Thank you for being here, Jesse. I'll let you expand a little bit more on that.
Great, thanks, Jenna. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up, perfect. Well, thanks so much for the invite to be here. I feel pretty humbled to be on this panel. There's some amazing experiences and really great people on this panel. And I mean, I also feel pretty humbled. I haven't climbed too many mountains and won too many awards, but yeah, I hope that what I can offer today is helpful or instructive at the very least. I'll try and keep it brief. So as Jenna had said, I'm a senior policy analyst with the Climate Action Secretariat here in BC. And I know this is a panel on working internationally, working globally. And I think one of the things that, and before I get into how I got here, one of the things that really kind of keeps that element kind of alive in my day-to-day work, sense of being connected to kind of the global community, is through the work I do on climate and the work that we do here at the Climate Action Secretariat on climate issues. And I mean, I can't think of anything more global than the issue of changing climate, irrespective of where you are. It's going to impact you. And so I think it's an important thing to kind of realize, or to keep front in mind is kind of whatever you do, it doesn't necessarily, like, there's many ways to work internationally or to work on global issues. And one of the things I really enjoy about my work here at the Secretariat is having that link to the international and learning from other jurisdictions across Canada, across North America, and across the world on global issues. So just kind of a plug to thinking about how you can meet that interest in maybe ways that doesn't necessarily maybe present itself right away. But just to a little bit on how I got here. So I was actually, one of my first kind of volunteer stints was with Mines Action Canada, with Erin's team in Ottawa. I did my undergrad at the University of Ottawa in International Development and Globalization. And I did some work on the Landmine Awareness Weeks. I think that's what they were called, over a number of years. And it was just such a great opportunity. It was an amazing group of people. And it was just a good opportunity for me to do some volunteer work during my undergrad and get to build those skills and those relationships and kind of that knowledge base. So yeah. As Jen had said in my introduction, I spent a few years abroad, kind of a bit of volunteer work and some studying. So I did my master's degree in the United Kingdom, and then through that I was able to line up an internship with the United Nations Environment Program in Nairobi. And when I was there, I was working on clean transportation issues, and it was a really amazing opportunity. I lived in Kenya for 14 months, and half of that was as an intern, and after my internship was done, I was hired on as a consultant to work on the same project. And it's a super exciting opportunity, but my passion was always, or has been water issues. So when I got to the end of my time in Kenya, I reached out to an organization that works in Palestine, in Jordan, and Israel. At the time, it was called Friends of the Earth Middle East. They've changed their name now. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. And so after leaving Kenya, I went there to do a 6-month internship where I was researching water issues in the Jordan River Basin. And so this was yet another volunteer opportunity, but again, it was one of those interesting opportunities that was fun, it was exciting, it was an adventure, but it also again kind of helped me to build up my skills, my relationships, and really helped to steer me towards what I ultimately studied during my PhD, which was transboundary freshwater governance and management issues, and that's what I studied at the University of Victoria. And so I think kind of one of the things that I'd like to kind of pick up on that Sandra had offered, which is kind of lessons that I might be able to offer as well, is being able to really say yes to those fun, exciting adventures as much as possible. And like all the panelists have said or have insinuated, you really you don't know where it's going to take you. It can take you many different places, but you won't know unless you say yes. And but there's a caveat with that, because I might be a bit of a cautionary tale too, because I did, I think, 4 internships in total after I was done my master's before I was able to secure full-time work. I think that's entirely way too many. I don't think that's the right way to do it. So maybe use that as a bit of a what not to do, but I think the point is to put yourself out there as much as possible. Say yes without being taken advantage of. I don't think I was. I just would offer to keep that front of mind, but be willing to put in the sweat equity. And what I mean by that is those internships are valuable. There's been a lot of scrutiny, I think recently, rightfully so, on the morality of accepting free work from young people, but I think there is some value. So I think it's up to the individual. And then totally echo what Sandra says, take those rejections. I'm still getting them a lot when I apply to jobs, but they're just part of the game. And It's nothing personal, and you just got to keep on applying to positions. And so I was really excited and really took that to heart when I heard Sandra say that, because it's something that I'm still keeping front of mind, and given that I am early in my career as well. So I'll end it at that, Jenna, and hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Jesse, and everyone else for further introducing yourself. I just have a few more directed questions before we take some questions from the audience. So each of you had mentioned kind of going towards higher education, getting your master's degree, or like Sandra, becoming a lawyer. And I'm just curious, as someone who is about to graduate, kind of what that higher education kind of added to your career experience, as well as also when you're applying to these jobs, what kind of helps make you stand out, you feel? I'll start with Sarah, since you're pretty new to the job industry and just starting off with your new career. So just kind of curious about the application process and yeah, how your master's degree kind of applied to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the very first thing I would say is that it's not necessary to go on to further education. I think that's a misconception. Is it useful? Absolutely. And does it make the process easier? Yes. But I think in terms of folks working internationally, there's already a lot of barriers in terms of, not everyone can afford to go on unpaid work. I was really fortunate that I did do an unpaid internship, but certain programs can be really expensive, whatnot. So I wouldn't say that it's something you have to do immediately or at all. There's lots of ways to garner experience, and that can be through more years on the job. That could be through your volunteer work, your activism, whatever that might be. But, my master's has been really useful to me. It's taught me a lot of skills that I've already used in my 2 weeks on the job. So in terms of learning to synthesize really complicated information, time management, which is something you are thrown in the deep end with when you go to grad school or law school. And the other main thing I would talk about would be kind of critical thinking. The type of topics you study and how you approach them in a graduate program is surprisingly different from an undergraduate, in terms of there's an expectation that you're already fully up to snuff when it comes to the base knowledge. So you're looking to really turn it on its head and see where you can poke holes in it. And that's actually a really great approach to writing good policy or operating programs effectively and evaluating them after the fact. So I would say that it is quite useful. Something I'd really like to emphasize is that taking time off can be effective for a lot of reasons. Not only can it help you figure out your career path, but also applications are hard work. Your graduate application should be a part-time job. It should not be something you submit last minute. For me, I spent 6 months. So I researched, then I reached out to folks who were in the programs of interest. I slid right into their LinkedIn DMs and I just asked them if they would chat with me. And it was incredibly effective. I was warned off of some programs that looked amazing and were apparently torturous. And I was given glowing reviews of a program that was going to be my last choice and ended up being one of the best years of my life. So I would really, really recommend that you do your research, not only through looking at the program sites, but also genuinely reaching out to people. It's also a really great way to build a cool network of folks who have similar interests. And I would narrow down your further education to something that's really going to serve you. Whether it will actually help you get a job is always going to be a bit of a game of roulette. So you may as well enjoy it. If you don't want to take a very professionalized program that has name, prestige, and costs you $26,000 a year, which would be the Mugg School of Global Business or Global Affairs, that's okay. It will help you with your career pathways, but if it doesn't bring you joy, then you only have so much time on earth. It's really worth considering all your options and not just going for what ranks the highest, right? And then finally, I'd say the last hidden perk of taking time off is if you do have financial barriers to going for a graduate degree, even though there is a lot of funding that exists, different organizations like the BC Public Service, the federal government, and then some not-for-profits, the larger ones, and certain other private companies will help fund your graduate education if you work there and sign a return of service, I think is the term they use for the BC Public Service. So there are alternate pathways to getting there, and they are things that I would definitely recommend people consider.
Thank you, Sarah. Maybe I'll ask Jesse if he wants to expand on the question.
Sure, yeah, thanks, Jenna. And I think Sarah really nailed it on a few things I would agree with. So graduate school isn't the end all be all. I think you can do some really interesting, creative, fun things without going that route and being open to those alternative pathways. I think the thing that I would emphasize though is the choice of going to a graduate program can offer a lot of door opening opportunities in the program itself. So not just when you're done. And what I mean by that is co-ops with provincial or federal governments or with other organizations. Schools are such an amazing resource of connections. Your professors are all coming to their courses and to their teaching duties with many times lifetime experiences, and with that comes connections and I could imagine that every professor would be more than happy to help their student with some introductions, even being involved with things like Model United Nations if you're at the master's level. I'm not sure if it's open with masters or if it's just undergrad, but I mean, the point being that if you do go that route, really take advantage of what the master's or what the graduate program has to offer outside of the coursework. Programs on campus, exchange opportunities, research opportunities, linking with international organizations, linking with local organizations, taking advantage of the connections that your professors have. Like the Center for Global Studies at UVic is a perfect example of on-campus communities where there's just a wealth of opportunities and interesting people to talk to and interesting talks to go to. So there's all these things that can all be done at the undergraduate level as well. None of those are closed off to undergrads, but there's definitely those opportunities. So I'll just leave it at that from that perspective.
Awesome. Erin, Sandra, do either of you want to? Erin?
Yeah, sure. So I think this is both based on my own perspective and on as someone who hires a lot of people for positions either during undergrad or right out of university. I think both Sarah and Jesse had really hit the nail on the head there. And side note, I did the math. Jesse did not volunteer at Mac while I worked there, and it's not somebody I've forgotten about. Momentary panic, not gonna lie. Yeah, I think further education can be very helpful, but I do really agree that taking some time off in between can help both with student debt issues as well as helping you know exactly what you want to do. And I found for my master's program, it was a Royal Rose program, so it was a very diverse group, and people that had more experience going in, I think, got more out of it than coming straight from their undergrad. Just a couple things on school though, when I hire people, I don't care what your GPA was, ever, just graduate. I know people like have lives and jobs and school, and like it can get too much. So if you don't have great grades, I don't care. I need you to be able to like do the job. And if you're going to do further degrees, make sure you really care about what you're going to research. And then finally, we talked about the International Youth Internship Programs, and there's the International Aboriginal Youth Internship Programs. Those are both great, but if that doesn't work out for you, I recommend volunteering in your own community. If you're going overseas and you're paying to volunteer, you're not really adding value to a community. Usually it'd be better to use your money to support people in their own community to do whatever you're doing. But volunteering at school and in your own community, I think is excellent for building skills as well as for showing interests in different activities. And in my specific line of work, if you don't have the ability to do any of these things, work retail or service jobs, because so much of what I do involves communication and convincing people to do things. If you're in the public service and you need your ADM to do something, if you're doing what I do and you need to convince diplomats of something, you're selling policy instead of shoes. If you've learned how to sell shoes, I guarantee you can sell to the government of San Marino that they should sign on to this treaty once you learn about the treaty. So if you're feeling really stressed about you don't have all the opportunities to do these fancy international experiences, if you have good customer service, retail service experience, and volunteering and interest in the area, that's going to look really good to someone like me who's used to hiring people as interns or entry-level positions. So don't panic if you can't afford to go overseas right away or anything like that.
Thank you, Erin. That's some very good advice. Sandra, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I'll just be very quick, just on the point of law school, because I know some of you may be considering going to law school. Just a note, I did my law school in Montreal at McGill. And so I was very lucky. I didn't need an undergrad to go into law school. So that meant that in a way, I don't have higher education. I don't have a master's degree. And I've always wanted to pursue one, but on something that means something to me, it will not help me at this stage in my career. And I don't think that it would have mattered as I've been able to move forward without it ever being an asset. I do think law school is really interesting and helps train your mind a little bit to what Sarah was saying earlier in terms of, being able to gain skills through a particular study. Law school does give you that. Is it the only way? No, absolutely not. I would do a cost benefit analysis. Like, it's so important. I put myself through school. I don't think if I had to tack on more years, I would have gone the distance. And I don't think it would have mattered. If you're passionate about what you want to do and you want to work internationally, you will find a way, regardless of what your studies are. You will gravitate towards that.
Thank you, Sandra. So I think we have about 10 more minutes to do one more question. I was going to ask what are the misconceptions about working in a global affairs job? Specifically, I think sometimes when we think of an international job, think of it as being glamorous. And of course, Erin mentioned working in Uganda and not having warm showers. And also, I can imagine the effects it has being gone for a long time from your home and how that affects your journey. So maybe I'll start with Erin for that question.
And this is hilarious because I did write down notes for this, and under this question I wrote down, it's glamorous as the biggest misconception. So perfect segue there. Yeah, like I said, aid work, I discovered I really do like a hot shower, and was super not keen on the idea of, is the war going to start again? And as to your question about your family thing, family connections and stuff. The last time I was overseas for a significant amount of time, I was still in East Africa, because developing a regional focus, if you're working internationally, is good. But it was a time when there was a famine in the region, and at some point my mom asked if I could call my then 85-year-old great aunt, because she had seen that there was famine on the news and was very concerned about me. And that, with the, all the other things, sort of made me reassess where I wanted to go, because I didn't necessarily like the idea of causing Aunt Vera that much stress. But yeah, so when it comes to aid work, like expat staff, you do paperwork. You're not the one out like handing out food, putting up structures, doing all that sort of stuff. So if you like spreadsheets and writing reports and logistics and stuff, that's great, but don't think that you're doing the glamorous handing over aid, etc. work. And then in my sort of advocacy diplomacy stuff, it's a lot of hours sitting in a chair in a windowless conference room, listening to people start every statement saying, as this is the first time I take the floor, I'd like to thank the chair for his excellent chairing of today's meeting, and then droning off on for a bit. You have really long hours. If you forget the word in a document, it can completely change the difference of it. And we send so many emails. My colleague and I are having a competition to see who can clear their inbox first. I started with 21,000 emails, and that was having about 20 subfolders that I've been using. So we send a lot of emails, and even the like glamorous stuff, like a reception at Parliament or the UN, especially at the UN, you have to make sure no one steals your food. Especially the Human Rights Council, they'll steal all your food. And then if you have to work too late, everything shuts down and your options for dinner are the vending machine. So there's a lot of like, oh, it's super glamorous at the UN. And I'm like, there's carpet on the walls, there's no windows, there's no food after 4 p.m. And if there is food, you have to make sure nobody steals it because it's for your event. I still love what I do, but it's not glamorous at all.
Thank you, Erin. Maybe I'll pass it on to Sandra next.
Thanks. Yeah, it's interesting because I don't want to dissuade people from an international career because I just love it so much. One of the things that surprised me right from the get-go was culture shock. So you think that everybody tells you that you're going to face it, but I was so happy when I moved to India and I was finally free and going to do the career that I really wanted to go do. And the first 3 weeks there, I was miserable. I wanted to come home. I thought I'd made the worst mistake of my life. And I remember the culmination one day where I'd been looking for an apartment. I'd finally found one. It was covered in cockroaches and I didn't have a bed yet. So I had to sleep on a yoga mat on the floor with all the cockroaches. And I'd forgotten that you also have to buy water. You can't drink water from the tap. And I had forgotten to buy water. And it was about 45 degrees in the apartment that didn't have air conditioning. And it was the worst night of my life. And I remember to this day that feeling of, why am I here? Why did I come here? And after that day, I had the best year of my life. So you're going to face these moments where you are homesick, you miss your family, you're not happy. And you just get tired, you get tired of sitting in a conference room, that's not what you want to be there to do it. And some people come after they do it several times over, they love their country, they love Canada even more, and that's okay too. So just be prepared to not be what you expect it to be, but be open to bad experiences.
Thank you, Sandra. I'll pass it on to Jesse next.
Thanks, John. And not too much to add on top of what Erin and Sandra have said. I mean, there's definitely the idea that it's glamorous and there's some exciting parts to it. But I mean, when I was working in Kenya and in Bethlehem in Palestine, I mean, the vast majority, 99.9% of my time was spent sitting at a computer, and it's, you know, I remember sitting there being like, I could be doing this from Canada, like just computer work. And I think just having your eyes kind of open as to what you're going into and managing your own expectations, I think will really help to maybe lessen the shock of what you imagine you'll be doing and versus what you are doing. I think there are some really exciting and interesting opportunities for sure that get you out from the computer. I think just the educational background I had and what I was lined up to do, that just in front of a computer. And then, yeah, I think I would be in the camp of had kind of geared everything towards working internationally in terms of my undergrad and all my volunteer work, and then spending a couple of years abroad and realizing like how much I love Canada. And you know, it's not to say that I wasn't enjoying what I was doing and where I was, but it was just a pretty profound appreciation for this country. And so I think eventually that's kind of what made me look for opportunities closer to home. But having said that, you know, I'm still very interested in exploring future opportunities for either working or traveling abroad for work. So yeah, just ended that. But I think keeping your eyes wide open and being okay with tough situations.
Thank you, Jesse. Sarah, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I have a couple things. I mean, I'd agree with Jesse absolutely that sometimes you go abroad and realize you don't really want to be there. I mean, you might want to be there, but it doesn't fill your cup like you expected. When I was at UVic, I did the European Union study tour and internship program, which was a fantastic program, and I would recommend it to anyone there if that's within your means currently. I was on internship there and was fortunate to work with a lobby group, so attended a lot of European Parliament events. And I distinctly remember being towards the end of my internship period. So I had been living in Brussels for about 3 months, and we were collectively drafting policy, like really interesting, exciting stuff. And I thought, this is such a waste because I don't live here. The European Union is interesting and I liked it for nerdy reasons, but it doesn't serve my country or my people. And it was something that really led me to pursue a master's in Canada when I originally had, you know, the dreams of doing it in the Netherlands or the UK or somewhere else. It was interesting because it was kind of a reality check that I was more patriotic than I expected, which was interesting. The main misconception that I would highlight that hasn't been touched on yet is that international work happens in Ottawa or abroad. There's an idea that you have to move to Ottawa if you want to do anything international. And even though 3 out of 4 of us are in Ottawa currently, I would really strongly oh, sorry, Erin, I thought you were, never mind. I would really strongly encourage you to push back on that idea. There's fantastic organizations across Canada that do international work, both locally engaged, whether that's, you know, the CIC is a good example. They do really interesting work and have job opportunities. There's the BC Council for International Cooperation, something along those lines. And there's a provincial version of each one of those all across Canada. There's a federal version, lots of locally engaged not-for-profits that do international work. And also lots of provincial government work that is internationally oriented. So that's what I would challenge, is that it doesn't have to happen in Ottawa, and it doesn't have to happen with the departments you expect it to. You know, the Public Health Agency of Canada does lots of international work, which people don't expect. So yeah, expand your definition of what it means to go global.
All right, thank you everyone for giving your very insightful answers. I've definitely been writing some notes here and there. Definitely will be using this in the future. Now I'm gonna hand it over to Chris. I know he's been taking some questions from the audience.
Yeah, thank you, Jenna. I'll jump in. Thank you, everybody, for all of your contributions. And for those that are listening, so we're in a meeting format, so we don't have the Q&A function. So if you have any questions, just drop them into the chat or email me, because I've had people emailing me as we've been moving along here. Some folks had to leave and want to get a recording, which we'll have later on. But where are we at? Well, Sarah mentioned networking, and of course, that is why we're here today. And we've got the Center for Global Studies here, and of course, the CIC. And you can always get in touch with us to talk about any of these issues that we're talking about today. And Sandra mentioned the worst day of her life in India. Full disclosure, Sandra and I ended up in Afghanistan at the embassy 10 years ago. I was the deputy military attaché at that time. And it was one of the most enjoyable, interesting years of my life. You don't often hear that when people talk about Afghanistan, but Sandra ended up there, I think if I recall, with the Department of Justice, seconded to Global Affairs, and I was there with the Department of National Defense. And an embassy is full of people with all different backgrounds: immigration, RCMP, security intelligence services. So when you are thinking about these global careers, it does help to know people who can tell you what is exactly happening out there in the world. And like Sandra, I mentioned I joined the Army when I was 17. I went to basic training in Cornwallis. I started off as a soldier before having an opportunity to become an officer. And I had been there for maybe just a few days. And I was on the phone to my mother, crying, desperately trying to want to get home. But she talked me down, and I stayed. And of course, it was the best decision that I made. And 36 years later, I eventually retired. And that does lead me to a question that I have for the folks here, especially with government. And it's one of those questions that when you get past, the fact that you're working and you're doing fun things, it's a realistic question to ask, and that's pensions. Pensions. What's at the end of the day for you after you've spent your entire lives working in a particular job? And I think I'd like to throw this question out to Sarah to start, because you're just joining the public service. How much of a deal was it for you when it came down to the pension piece? Was it a factor for you in going into the government?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. People don't like to talk about pensions or the work-life balance because they're the less kind of glamorous things about a job. But something I learned when I took that gap year between my undergrad and my master's, and I worked for the BC Public Service, was I had spent a lot of my life thinking I wanted this like big glamorous job, maybe working for the UN, maybe working for a not-for-profit, 60, 70 hours a week, but I'm like doing amazing work. And I have so much respect for those people because I realized working, 37 and a half hours a week is like A-okay with me. You will end up working a little bit more than that in government here and there, especially during the busy times. But something that really drew me to know that I wanted to pursue public service work again after my master's was that while working with the BC Public Service, things like education funds, training support, mentorship programs, pensions, paying into your RESPs, all of those things alongside the expectation that work ends at 5 p.m. usually you can't put a price tag on them. They're incredibly valuable to me and my mental health, and were things I lost for the year I was in grad school, that's for sure.
Jesse, do you want to weigh in? Was a pension a factor for you?
Yeah, honestly, not really. And when you asked that first, Chris, I was trying to think of why that was. And I think it's just because it had never been on my radar, that it wasn't something that was a selling feature for a position in the BC public sector. But since being here, it definitely is a good safety net to know that it's there. And I also, you know, with friends who aren't in a similar type of role, maybe they're outside of the public sector and they don't have that pension or that safety net. I do feel very fortunate to have it. So just, yeah, a long answer to an easy, not at first, but now I do appreciate it.
Thanks, Jesse. I'm going to switch a question here that I have, and that's to do with the French language, or just bilingualism in general, because when people think about government jobs, they often get a little concerned because, of course, you need to speak at least one official language, and possibly, you know, and arguably two if you want to progress. And Sandra, I was hoping that you could address that question for the federal public service, for example. How important is bilingualism as you move through the system?
Thanks, Chris. You know, it becomes more and more important depending on how high you want to go up in your career. So if you're at the senior most echelons, it's critical. So if you didn't learn your second language in high school, university, it is much more important. Does it matter? I have to say, I mean, unfortunately, I'm a Francophone. My first language is French. And so I really believe in promoting the French language. And it does hurt to me personally that people don't necessarily want to learn French as much as, and people in government don't necessarily feel that compulsion to learn French because they don't need it for their particular careers. The short answer is, if your ambition is not to become an assistant deputy minister, you can have a great career, especially if you're not in Ottawa, in government, and only speak English or in Quebec, French. But it's, you know, bilingualism is the wealth, and it is the one beautiful thing about our country. I think we should always embrace languages. And if you have the opportunity to improve your second language, you should do it. Not for your career, do it for because of what it means to be a Canadian.
Thanks, Sandra. Erin, I'm going to turn to you. I'm not going to press you on the question of pensions. I'm sure you have one, and you can tell us if you do, if you like. But I do have a question from Natalie in the audience who, and I think you touched on this already. You know, the university that you go to, the program that you take, how important is that when you're looking at that person for a particular job? Or are you just interested in the fact that they have shown that over a 4-year period that they are able to research and write and so forth?
Yeah, just on the pension thing, I did work for a couple of years for the public service, and leaving that to go to a nonprofit was something I thought hard about. But I do have like RRSP contributions from work and all of that sort of stuff. So I don't think it's a deal breaker, but when your parents are financial planners, it's something you definitely know to look for. And just to pick up on Sarah's point, we don't work 60-hour weeks. Nobody should ask you to work a 60-hour week. That's inappropriate and you'll burn out. So if you're working for a nonprofit and they want you to work that hard, they better be paying you a crap ton of money. We put a really strong focus on mental health, and sure, we work late sometimes, but I mean, you guys are actually keeping me late today. And your question about, from Natalie, no, it's really the importance of showing that you have the dedication to finish the degree and you can do the reading and stuff. I really prefer my students and and new staff to write like people and not like academics. And just specifically because I'm normally based in Ottawa, but because of the pandemic, I have the flexibility to work from Victoria, which is much better. There's no snow out there, people, in Ontario. I mean, if you're at Carleton, we do internships for credit through NIPSIA most of the time, so send me a note. But we also do internships with U of Ottawa. But once you're done, nah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when we're talking about the type of degree, and I know this from my wife, who was with the Department of National Defense and the Coast Guard, when it comes and in the HR world, it didn't really matter what kind of degree you had. It was the fact that you had the degree, and then you would enter into the system and off you would go. I think the other lesson that I learned from her was that often when you're contemplating government jobs or jobs in any position, you are often looking at something that you think, well, that's the level I should be at because I have a BA or I have an MA and that's where I should be. But some of those jobs can be very hard to obtain. And the lesson learned along the way has been to sometimes enter into an organization in a lower position. And this especially applies to the government, because I know from her experiences bringing people in clerical roles or administrative roles, what we would call like AS1, AS2, or CR4 roles. If you take on a role like that with a BA, once you're inside the organization, things open up for you because you see jobs that aren't posted, there are deployments available and so forth. And many of the people she took on moved quite rapidly. I think, Sandra, from your experience, have you seen the same thing in government?
Absolutely. And I mean, it requires a little bit of networking, but the reality today is that networking is what gets you everywhere. Networking meaning it can be cold calling someone and, indicating that you're interested in what they do and you want to talk to them more about it. And then you've got a hook into that particular organization. But Chris, you're so right that, once you get your foot in the door, then all of a sudden you've got opportunities that other people aren't seeing. Exactly what you said. And that is how I got into the Department of Justice, the Federal Department of Justice, because by the time I came back from Holland, I was completely removed from the federal government or law firms. And so I had to do some cold calling, and they offered me it was a summer student position, but I had actually passed the bar and I was a fully qualified lawyer. I took the job, and the day I started, they said, well, we've done some research and we're gonna, we've got money, so we'll hire you as a lawyer. And that's how I got in, some 20 years ago. And again, you've got to be willing to take those things that might not sound perfect, but it is your foot in the door.
Yeah, definitely. And we were speaking about languages and French in particular. And for a lot of people that may be listening, they may not speak French, but I can tell you from personal experience, if you enter into the government, especially in my case, the Department of National Defense, there is language training provided to you. When I look back on my career of 36 years in the armed forces, I have to say that 2 years of that time was spent in a classroom learning to speak French. And when I was in high school and I was learning French, I would think to myself, who cares? But boy, was I wrong. When the language requirement is there, you're not left out in the cold, but it certainly helps to have a bit of a background in a language like French. Or if you're from Quebec and you don't speak English very well, of course, it works both ways. And languages in general, I think I served in Turkey for 3 years, and I spent 6 months on a language course learning to speak Turkish. And it really impressed upon me the importance of knowing another language, even if you just know the basics. And I'd just like to, turn to our panel. your impressions on learning another language other than French or English. Have you done it? Would you recommend it? Does it open doors for you? Somebody like to take that on?
I guess I hate awkward silences, so
Go ahead,
I'll
Erin.
start. So when I was in Uganda, I did my best to learn Acholi. I can still pretty much just tell a motorcycle taxi driver where I want to go and order chicken. But that if you're living somewhere, you definitely do need to learn the basics of the hellos, goodbyes, and trying to get around. I'm currently learning Swedish for reasons that we don't have time for me to get into. But I am finding it, at least when I, need to ask the Swedish government for money, putting a few nice words in the beginning of the email, or being able to like chat at events and stuff is quite helpful. But yeah, if you're going to be living in a country, you need to do your best to at least pick up some of the language, but I'll leave it there.
Sandra, would you like to weigh in? Do you speak a third language?
Sorry?
Do you speak a third language?
So I speak Spanish, and then when I was in India, I learned Hindi. When I was in Afghanistan, I learned Dari. And when I was in Ramallah, I learned Arabic. And I don't speak any of these languages well, but it doesn't matter. I learned enough, and I took all of them for years, where people are so happy that you're trying to learn their language. You're essentially opening the door onto another culture. There are so many cultural references just in use of words and choice of words. And people want to talk to you and interact with you in a completely different way once you learn a language. For me, it's just, it's the best part about learning about different places. So I'm trying to learn by myself Russian during the pandemic. So that's my side project. But it's just a beautiful opportunity that we have to learn about cultures. And if you truly want to work abroad and are interested, then I think being immersed in a culture is part of that.
Thanks, Sandra. Sarah or Jesse, anything to add?
Yeah, I'd add a couple things. I absolutely agree with Sandra that it's not necessarily important if it's an actual requirement of the job posting. It shows an enormous amount of respect. And something I would encourage undergraduate students is that if there's an area of the world that you're interested in for your research, try to learn the language alongside it, or take culture courses, even if you are familiar with the music of the region or the popular dances or the way that they eat and engage with each other as a community. That makes a huge difference if you want to later go on to do field work or work with a not-for-profit or government agency that is working with locally engaged partners. Having that cultural fluency and ideally some linguistic ability is huge, even if you don't use it often. Yeah, much like Erin, it's often used to grease the wheels. So when I worked, when I was interning in the European Union, my boss of the lobbying group would often get me to wheel out my not so great Spanish as like a fun party trick, because the Spanish representatives loved it. They thought it was so cute. And things like that can often get people to open the doors to having more important career conversations with you.
Yeah, definitely. Jesse, anything to add?
I think it's everything I would agree with, and it's been well said, so I have nothing to add. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, another language it's another tool in the toolkit. And I'll put a plug in for the University of Victoria, because over the last couple of years, I took 20 hours of Arabic and 20 hours of Mandarin. I'm hopeless in both. But besides the language piece, there was the cultural piece. And to be honest, I've actually thrown a few words around since, and it does make a difference, even though it may be just a few words. But I think what it draws our attention to is the fact that the more tools you have in that resume that look a bit different from the person who's competing with you, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have a question from Lily that's just come in. Does having French language and a culture certificate look good on applications? And for us, having the language is enough. It might make you call a colleague. Okay, so yeah, oh, so that's your answer, Erin. Oh, so Erin's already answered that question. Okay, in the chat, perfect. So I'm mindful of the time, and I see it's 4:22, and we just have a few minutes left. So I think it's probably good if we close our session today, and let everybody go. And it's been a lot of fun. It's been fun seeing Erin, who we had come here to Victoria to speak at Royal Roads, and Sarah, who was here, a CIC member, Jesse, who was a CIC Victoria member, and we need to sort that out probably, I don't know. And of course, seeing Sarah again after, or Sandra, sorry, Sandra, after 10 years or so as well. So just to close it out, I'd like to thank, first of all of our panelists for taking the time, 90 minutes of your time when we're inundated with a sea of Zoom calls all the time, every day. And so to do that for us, I can't thank you enough. And I'd like to thank Jenna, because Jenna had a lot of work to do to get ready for this today. And of course, our great friends at the Center for Global Studies who hosted us and took care of all the technical side of things. And we have a recording, which will, of course, we'll be sharing with those that weren't able to join us today.